Kyle Constant, Digital Services Librarian at Trails Regional Library in Warrensburg, and this is another edition of our online training. Today we're going to be talking about using OverDrive with an e-reader. The bad news is that this is probably the most complicated way to use OverDrive. The good news is that the list of devices that requires this is shrinking every day. Most devices that people are using nowadays to use audiobooks or ebooks will be things like their tablets, phones, things like that that can use the app, or they'll be using Kindles, which can use the Kindle method. If you haven't watched those videos before, go watch those first, then watch this training, because there will be some things that inevitably I'm going to gloss over a little bit because we've already covered them in the other videos. So again, if you're starting from here, go back, watch those other two videos immediately prior to this one, the one on using the OverDrive app and then using OverDrive with the Kindle. Those will be instructive in some of the basics, and then you can more easily follow what I'm going to do today. And hang on just one second. I'm going to mute something on my computer because I'm hearing myself twice and I don't want that. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so that you can see what I'm doing. We're going to start off with Missouri Libraries to Go, as we often do in these trainings anyway. I apologize again if I seem stuffy. That's because I am. I'm fighting some sinus stuff, so I apologize if I sound a little weird. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit larger for you so that maybe it will be easier to see. Again, that may make some things display a little bit differently than they would for you, because you're going to, because I just blew it up so that you can see it a little bit easier on the video. The first thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is when you use this method, you have to use Adobe Digital Editions. This is a separate piece of software. It's free, but it has to be installed on a PC that is going to be used to download the materials, and then we're going to transfer them over to the e-reader device using a USB cable. And to find that software, one way is to just scroll all the way down on Missouri Libraries to Go, and down here where it says Applications, you can click on that link, and that will bring you to this page, and you can see other things on this page as well. But Adobe Digital Editions is noted here. You click on that, and you're presented with this site, which will explain a little bit to you and to the patron about how to download Adobe Digital Editions and what it does and things like that. The best way to get to a download link is just to come up here to this menu and click download, and you'll be presented with several links to download the most updated version, which looks like it is 4.5 for Windows and Mac. You don't want the apps. These are for mobile devices, and we already know that we want to use the OverDrive app for mobile devices. We're not going to use Adobe Digital Editions. This is only for folks who cannot use the app or cannot use the Kindle method. Devices that would need something like this would be a Nook, an e-reader style Nook. Nook tablets can actually use the app as well, the OverDrive app, so they don't need this. But the e-reader Nooks, the Sony e-readers, if there's any of those still around, they've stopped making those, but some people may still have them, and the Kobo e-reader. Those are probably the three most prominent e-readers that would require this type of process. It's possible that there are others out there that have been manufactured that anytime something gets to be to a critical mass where any manufacturer can make them, then you end up with a lot of knockoffs, a lot of products that are cheap and are maybe put in retailers that you don't really hear a whole lot about. And so consequently, I haven't tested everything that's out there. But those are the three big ones: the Sony e-reader, the Kobo, and the Nook. So once you download and install Adobe Digital Editions, you'll be prompted to create an Adobe ID, and that's going to be very similar to any other online account creation process. It's going to ask you for your name, email address, create a password, and that's essentially it. Once that's created, then your Adobe Digital Editions will be set up, and then you can start authorizing devices. And I'll show you a little bit of Adobe Digital Editions when we get to that point, but the patron will want to have Adobe Digital Editions installed before they go to Missouri Libraries to Go and select titles to download. Okay? So let's go back to Missouri Libraries to Go. And as I always say, first thing I'm going to do is sign in. And it's going to ask me for my library. I'm going to put in Trails. It's going to want my library card number. That in. Now that I'm signed in, and you can see it says sign out here up at the top, so I know I'm signed in. Then I can start searching around for books. In this case, I don't really care what I check out because it's just for training purposes, but if they want to do specific searching, again, you can go back to some of the other videos and I show you how to do some of that. But I'm just going to grab this very first one and borrow it. And there it is on my bookshelf. Using this method, using the e-readers that require a transfer via USB, you're going to want to use EPUB. Again, I mentioned this in the Kindle video, but the only devices that you're going to want to actually select this Kindle version is an Amazon Kindle product. Kindles have a similar issue to, say, Kleenex or Xerox, where their brand has come to signify all e-readers or all tablets to some people. And so when you say, do you have a Kindle? Some people are tempted to say yes, even when in some cases it's not. It's not a Kindle, it's a Nook, or it's an e-reader of some other kind, but they just think of Kindle as being synonymous with e-readers. So that's important. Make sure that you know what model device that the patron has. But if it's a device that cannot use the app or cannot use the Kindle method, you're going to want to select EPUB, and then you're going to want to click confirm and download. Now, this step will vary depending upon patron to patron, person to person. My browser is set up to ask me where I want to save files by default. It always asks me this. This is something that you can change in your browser. If you want it to automatically run a file in its default program, in other words, when you download this, you can have it where it automatically opens it in Adobe Digital Editions, and that's fine. This is just my preference. I like to save it to my computer first and then open it from my computer. I just have my desktop open here, so I'm just going to save this file. You can see under the file type, if you look right here under where the file name is, it says Adobe Content Server Message. That's the file type. Okay, so it doesn't say ebook. This is not the book itself. This is an Adobe Content Server Message. What this file does is it allows Adobe Digital Editions to go out to the designated server that is designated in this file, know who checked it out, what service they're getting it from, how long your lending period is, and things like that. So this is not the book. And that is something that, you know, in some cases you'll need to clarify for the patron. They'll think that they're done after this step. They save this, they try to transfer that over to their device, and they don't know why the book isn't there. This is not the book. This is just a small file telling the server what book to give you in Adobe Digital Editions. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Chrome does something kind of nice, the Chrome browser, in that whenever you download a file, it pops up this dialog down at the bottom that allows you to then immediately open it from there if you wish. Not all browsers do that. If your browser doesn't do that, you'll have to go out to whatever file or whatever folder, you saved it in and open it from there. In my case, for instance, I could go out to my desktop and open it from there. But I'm just going to go ahead and click this, and it's automatically going to open up the default program and run this file. You saw it automatically. It said it was fulfilling the Metropolis case. So that was it that was the process of it interpreting the server file that we downloaded, going out to the server, finding the copy of the book that we wanted to download and that we had the checkout for, and downloading it to Adobe Digital Editions, and there it is. It's much faster to do this than it is for an audiobook. I'll do a training later on audiobooks. They take a little bit longer and they use a different app. So we'll cover that in another time. But for ebooks, the files are actually very small and they are usually downloaded pretty darn quickly. Now, because I chose to open this specific file in Adobe Digital Editions, it's already open. If I want, I can read it from here. You can see I'm just turning pages using this arrow key down here at the bottom. You can do this and you can read everything on your computer if you want, but most people are going to want to transfer it to a separate device that they would read from. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. So from here, you're going to have the option up here to go back to your library. So you want to click that, and you can see there are some other books here that I've been doing some testing with just to get ready for this training. And you can see that they have their specific lending period on here. Not only does it say here in this ribbon 1 week, but it also says the day that it was added. It says the last page read. And you see, again, I've just been downloading these and not reading them. That's why they all say one of however many pages. And then over here on the left, you can see that the last book I read was the Metropolis Case. And I have different bookshelves. You can change, if let's say that you had a huge library of books in Adobe Digital Editions, you can add all sorts of bookshelves and organize your books into sci-fi and mystery and romance and things like that if you wanted to, or just things I want to read versus things that I'm finished with, or whatever. However you want to organize your collection, you can do that. That's what these shelves are for. But if you watch over here where it says bookshelves, I'm going to go ahead and connect my device now, and you won't be able to see that, but essentially all that process entails is me connecting, and in this case it is a Nook, and you can see my autoplay window pops up. Excuse me. Asking me what I want to do with my Nook. I'm just going to close that because I want to show that it automatically appears now under devices in Adobe Digital Editions. So now that it's connected, all I did was I took my Nook, I connected using the cable that came with the Nook. I connected one end to the device and the other end into the computer that I'm using to download these books, and I'm using to run Adobe Digital Editions. So as soon as it was recognized, it shows up as a device. At this point, all you have to do is grab the Metropolis Case. That's the one I just downloaded. Drag it over, and you can see it has a red circle with a cross in it, indicating that I can't do whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But whenever I hover over the Nook, then it has a green plus. I can let go. It popped up and said copying to device, but again, it's that fast, those files are that small that it just kind of pops up for an instant and then it's there. If you want to double check, you can always click on the Nook and see, okay, there it is. I know it's on there. Most devices also will allow you, while it's still hooked up, to unlock them, go into the library on the device and make sure that it's there before you ever disconnect it. If you are not seeing this device on Adobe Digital Editions, if it's not recognized, honestly, the best way to troubleshoot that is just to unplug it, plug it back in, make sure that your cable is good, make sure that the cable is securely connected to the computer. It's really a fairly simple connection process, so there really can only be so many things wrong with connecting the Nook or another e-reader to Adobe Digital Editions. Feel free to give me a call if you have trouble with a patron having issues connecting. Google is your friend. Try to Google your problem and see if you can solve it yourself and see if you can find an answer for the patron. And that's also a good thing to demonstrate to patrons, is how to do a simple Google search for troubleshooting things like that. And then that way, they might be a little bit more comfortable doing that for themselves in the future. Excuse me. A couple other things that I want to show you real quickly in Adobe Digital Editions is that in the help screen, you can find authorization information. This will tell you what Adobe ID you're currently using. And you can see the Adobe ID that is currently authorized on this computer, hopefully you can read that, is constantk@trailslibrary.org. That's the ID that I'm using on this computer. Also, you can choose, select the Nook and then click this menu here to see what kind of authorization information is used for this device. And you can see I've actually got two Adobe IDs authorized for this one. My work email and my personal email are both authorized on this device. That is something that you have to do when you first hook up a device to Adobe Digital Editions. It will ask you to authorize it with your Adobe ID. As you could see there on that Nook, it doesn't require only one Adobe ID. So in some cases, you may have a patron that thinks they've already got something authorized and they're not sure what to do. It might be better to just start from square one. Set up Adobe Digital Editions, set up a new Adobe ID, reauthorize the device with a new Adobe ID, and just start from scratch. That may be the best way to go if somebody has gone through this process before and is struggling with it this time for whatever reason. Sometimes, uninstalling the Adobe Digital Editions and reinstalling it will clear up some of those issues. From Adobe Digital Editions, you can also return materials similar to the way you could from the OverDrive app. I can select one of these books, right-click on it, and again, I have other options here. I can read it. I can copy it to one of my bookshelves. Again, if I have something that is, let's say, a bookshelf called Vonnegut, and I want all my Kurt Vonnegut books on that bookshelf, I could copy it over to that. I can copy it to my my computer or my Nook from here. I can get more item info. It's already on my Nook. That's why that's grayed out, in case you're wondering. Or I can return the borrowed item. Now, similar to the app and the Kindle version, there's also the option to remove it from the library. I think I've mentioned this in the other tutorials, but removing it from your library only deletes it. It doesn't actually return it to the library. So my recommendation for patrons whenever I'm training them is always to choose the return borrowed item option, and then it will ask you, are you sure? Say yes, return, and then coming back out to my account, see here's Bluebeard right here. I should be able to refresh this page and Bluebeard's gone. So I don't have that book checked out anymore. It has been returned and now another patron can use it. That's useful for patrons who are at their checkout limit but have read everything that they've got checked out, or they've read 2 or 3 of them or whatever, and they want to check out more. Let's say that they want to have their max because they're going to go on a trip, not sure about Wi-Fi connection while they're gone. They want to get as many books loaded on their device as possible. That it's good for that purpose. Then they can check out up to their limit and not have to worry about waiting for that loan to expire. But again, you can see this book, the Metropolis case, doesn't have the option to return it down here. I have to go into Adobe Digital Editions, right-click on it, and return it. In order to return it, I can't do it from Missouri Libraries to Go. So here's my bookshelf. I'll refresh it, and now that's gone. So if you have a patron who has either removed it from their library and it's off of their device, but it's not returned, it's still showing up here, and now they're having trouble figuring out how to delete it because it's not in Adobe Digital Editions, it's not on their device, but it's also not returned. In a lot of cases, if they haven't used up their allotment of downloads, the best thing to do is to download it again into Adobe Digital Editions and then select return from the menu. In fact, let's go back out to, okay, Windswept is there. Let's remove it from the library just to show as an example what that looks like. And see, I haven't removed these, but I have returned them to the library, and you can see I cannot open these because they've been returned. I returned them from the Nook shelf, and now when I come back out to my computer, then the files are still there, but I don't have a loan for those anymore. So that one I can't open. And Metropolis Case should be the same way. Yeah, I don't have a loan for it anymore. I returned it from the Nook screen, so my loan period on that is gone. So I'm going to go back here to Windswept. I've only downloaded this one time, so I should be able to download it again. Again, it asks me, but it won't always ask patrons. Sometimes it will just go ahead and open it in Adobe Digital Editions, and that is a browser setting. I can't necessarily say what it will do every time for you, just because it's impossible to predict how some people have their browsers set up. But I go ahead and open it. Again, it's fulfilling that. It opens it up. It's in my library again. So now that it's back in my library, I can choose return, and there we go. And if I refresh, well, sometimes, this is a good example, sometimes it takes a minute or two to go away. This book is a good example of one that I have not yet downloaded, and it shows the return title option here. That is only there as long as you have not downloaded it at all from Missouri Libraries to Go. So that is the essentials of how you use OverDrive with a Nook or Kobo or Sony Reader, some other kind of e-reader that cannot use the app or the Kindle method of selecting books from OverDrive. I'm going to stop screen sharing real quick, and I'm going to check just to make sure I don't have any questions. And seeing none, I will go ahead and quit the training at that point. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you all being attentive this morning, and I will see you next time. Thanks.